Very good evening, friends. Meeting again in the session of Stuart Close Philosophy, and we have started discussing the second chapter from Stuart Close Philosophy, that is the general interpretation. In this chapter, he tried to explain the homeopathy, the scientific system of medicine, and why it is scientific, and he is giving the reasoning that he has first explained the 8 specific laws or doctrines or propositions which are followed by the basic sciences, that is the physics, chemistry, biology, and the homeopathic laws goes hand in hand with all of them. So this is very important thing which he tried to explain over there in this specific chapter, and few aspects of it he is taking into consideration, out of which he says that Dr. Van Grewal, who has some aspects from Van Grewal are very necessary, very much necessary to understand those things. And he has given over there that in last paragraph what we discussed, that the whole system of homeopathy is based upon the facts and experimentation. It is not a thing, it is not a thought which has created the system of homeopathy, or any law in the homeopathy is not a product of just a speculation, but it is the product of thorough experimentation through an art of observation. So Hahnemann have followed throughout his life the Bacon's 4 specific principles on which the inductive reasoning have been developed in Hahnemann, that is the exact observation, correct interpretation, scientific construction, and rational explanation. And through these 4 stages, every law he has elaborated over there. We were on page number 9, the first paragraph we have finished, and we have completed up to the art of observation. Now let us start with the second. What he says: all conceptions in our inner being as well as external things are based primarily upon the perception of our senses, including the consciousness or the inner sense. But the formation of our ideas, judgments, conclusions must result from determinate. Determinate means exact, nemka, objective laws inherent in the things themselves and their constitution, and not from caprice. Caprice means lahari, vikshipta, changeable. So what he says over there, whatever the conception arises in our mind, the thought which arises in our mind should be the product of experimentation, should be a product of fact. It is not just what I thought, what I felt. It is not changeable entity. It should be fixed. It should be rigid. It should come out from certain experimentation. It should be a deduction after experimentation. And if it comes out, it has meaning. Or if it is just a thought, it should be followed with 4 criteria. If it 100% follows that 4 criteria of inductive reasoning, then you can think about it. Then it has a significance. Homeopathic system of medicine is totally based upon those 4 specific criteria, that is exact observation, correct interpretation, scientific construction, and rational explanation, and not on caprice. There is no capriciousness. What Hahnemann felt is not there. Why Hahnemann felt is there. So everything is specifically experimented oriented. And second important thing, whatever is there is nothing but exactly based upon the scientific construction. And these things he tried to explain over there. And what he says in next paragraph, every event in the circle of nature, natural phenomena, has a conditional necessity, since it can only result from its precedents and depends upon them. This conditional necessity results from primary unconditional necessity from of the fundamental laws of nature and their absolute truth. So he is explaining the concepts of science over here. So whatever present develops has some past. Whatever may be the present state, it has some past. It has some past reason. There must be some cause. That cause was the first primary cause because of which present state of the condition is there. In future, something develops, the fact which is happening at present becomes the cause of next thing. And this happens throughout the life of the human being. Same thing happens whenever we think about the disease. There is some prior entity because of which the presence of present condition develops. So this if you go back, you reach to a certain level where you reach to the absolute truth or nature. Then you cannot go beyond that. Kant has followed the same thing when he considered the miasms. Hahnemann said that it is suppressed skin eruptions ultimately leading to form new diseases to which Hahnemann labeled by the name of Sora. But Kant has question in his mind from where it has been suppressed. The thought was very clear. So what Kant has done? Kant has studied in such a manner that he says that if it is the product of suppressed skin eruption either in the past or family history, if we go back, we can reach to the first human being. And there also the Sora is there, then there might be a two questions arises in our mind. Either it was there in God or it is the truth that it is not just suppressed eruption, something more than that. And then Kant explained that it is will and ego which is the prime Sora, and that concept is completely different than the what Hahnemannian concept of understanding Mahayana. And this scientific aspect he is explaining over there. The conditional necessity results from primary unconditional necessity of the fundamental laws of nature and their absolute truth. It starts, it is there right from you. So before Newton, everything was falling down. It doesn't mean that law, because of law, it is falling down. The truth was there, it was happening, but he has considered, he came to the conclusion, yes, there must be some law which we can deduct, and because of which this is happening. This is the truth which came out, but it was there. That was the thing which was prior present. Laws of nature are the forms by which the constant course of natural phenomena from given causes and conditions may be expressed. Laws. So whatever the laws which we have deducted, they exist right from the phenomena which happens in the nature. So that is what he is explaining. He is explaining. See what he says in next paragraph. Then we understand. Laws do not cause the existence of the events or phenomena. By virtue of the laws, we may explain to ourselves intellectually not the existence but the connection of phenomena and so come to understand their development and condition. So before Newton also the same thing was happening. After Newton's law of gravitation, the same thing is happening. What has the change? The change is that we have started understanding why these apples falls down, why everything put are kept in sent to in high places falls down. Then we understood it is because of the gravitational force. We came to the conclusion because we have understood the truth behind that. So phenomenon was present, the reasoning was not known. Because of law, we came to the conclusion, yes, this is the reasoning. So law, because of law, the facts never happens. Because of the facts, we came to the conclusion of laws. We understand phenomena, not by any apparent properties of phenomena themselves, but by intuitive perception or immediate consciousness of the fundamental law. Such laws as the law of cause and effect, the equivalence and contrariety of the action and reaction, the constancy of matter and force are intuitively pursued to be the ultimate reason of which we can have any knowledge. So, all these laws are the product of the things, the facts happening in the nature. The phenomenon happens in the nature on the basis of which we have understood there is a law of attraction, there is law of reciprocal action. We came to the conclusion on the basis of two things only. We have understood that magnet attracts the piece of iron, and then after a lot of observation we came to the conclusion and we have labeled that there is a magnetic force which develops because of magnet and because of which iron gets attracted. It was there right from beginning before even we have understood the power, magnetic power, but it was there. On the basis of cause and effects, we deducted that and we have explained. We have deducted on the cause and effect that because of the gravitational force of the moon, there are changes in the sea levels. The flood ebbs happens to be there because of the moon's gravitational force. It is the product of cause and effect. Nothing is there, and still we have understood and we have labeled that this is most scientific. So, scientificity always requires two important parameters. There must be a cause on one side and there must be an effect on another side. If it persists again and again, you can label, you can catch, yes, there must be something in between, and then we can deduct and come to the conclusion of law. Laws of nature in general are a deduction of experience and observations with regard to the necessary course of events and phenomenon from given elements, the ultimate course of which lies beyond physical science in the dynamics, in the domain of metaphysics. There are many things which comes under the name of metaphysics. So metaphysics is the thing which you cannot show materially is the metaphysics. We call it by the name of dynamics. Physics says it by the name of metaphysics because that is also a dynamic. But instead of using the word dynamic, they use metaphysics because they cannot measure, they cannot show, they cannot explain, but they explain only on the basis of two things, cause and effect. And there are many conditions which are only based upon those two evidences, cause and effect, and you cannot show them. And these are the things which are there in the physics also. The same is true when we think about the homeopathy. If we know that medicine, actual medicine, which cannot find it out or you cannot show that actual medicine is present in material quantity in that specific medicine prepared, but if we give it to the patient or prover, it shows its symptomatology. And when it comes out as a symptomatology, as a reaction, then we can say, yes, there is cause, there is an effect, even though the material is not visible, it acts. So if it is so, then why don't you believe that homeopathy is also a science? Homeopathic medicine is not a placebo, it is also a scientific. So he is trying to explain the concepts behind that, and he is putting forward that if the science follows many things on the basis of cause and effects, why don't you follow the homeopathy as a science? That which changes the regular course of states and events, however, results in the consequence of causes which may be determined by physical science by considering fundamental laws of nature. Every change of the state or event has a number of causes known as primary or secondary causes or as cause and condition. So what he is saying, every fundamental law is the deduction of all those things which happens to be there. The changes, what he says, that which changes the regular course of states and events, however, results in consequence of causes which may be determined by physical science by considering fundamental laws of nature. So after doing something, if such a change happens, then physical science says, yes, there must be something behind that. And then they tries to find it out, the correlation between it, and then they explain, says this happens because there is a such and such law. There are many things like that, and which we can understand only on the basis of cause and effects, and with which we label by the name of metaphysical science. And now he turns towards the certain things. He explains that behind a present state of condition, there are many causes which are present. It is not single cause which is responsible to produce any change in anything. And there are two varieties of causes. There is one cause is always called as primary, and another, there are many which are called by the name of secondary. Why he is explaining all those things? He is explaining all those things because he wants to tell you one truth, that no disease develops because of single cause. Even though the modern science accepts, but he is very clear regarding his thoughts. Simple example is that your if you do your tuberculin test, the Montos test, many times it found to be positive. In India, after 80 years of age, many people have positive Montos test. Earlier, when Montos test was introduced, they were saying that if your Montos test is positive, you are having tuberculosis. After some time, they have started understanding that Even the Montos test is positive, the patient doesn't have tuberculosis, open tuberculosis or any tubercular infection. So they started explaining it means that you have tubercular bacilli in your body, but till you have not have a tuberculosis. Means Montos test positive means your body has tubercular bacilli. Then why don't you get the tuberculosis? The reason, if we want to understand, it is hidden over here. What is explained by Kent in two forms. He says their prima causa morbi of tuberculosis is Mycobacterium tuberculosis. But unless and until the secondary causes are present, this prima causa morbi cannot do anything. So unless and until the things are favorable, like miasm is favorable, like constitution is favorable, like susceptibility is favorable, this prima causa morbi cannot do any harm to the human being. So unless and until the secondary causes are present, the prima causa morbi cannot do anything. He wants to explain this scientific concept behind it. So when the modern science says tuberculosis is caused by the Mycobacterium tuberculosis, this is an half truth. This is not a complete truth. Complete truth is that Mycobacterium tuberculosis produce tuberculosis only when secondary causes are for it. So every disease is the product of primary plus secondary causes. No single cause can produce a disease. And this is what he explains over there. And then he explains why he is saying so. A spark of fire put into the barrel of powder is the cause of explosion that follows. So what he says? If there is barrel which is full of powder, and if you put just a spark of fire, and if there is an explosion, what he says is very correct. The chemical composition of the constituent of power and their mode of combination supply necessary conditions for the explosion to occur. If that powder has the capacity to explode, then only the spark of fire produces explosion. If that powder doesn't have a characteristic of explosion, nothing will happen even though you put sparks of fire. So condition should lie over there inside, then and then this prima causa morbi can do anything. Without that, it cannot. Every change implies the or presupposes something constant, and that is something at least two opposite tendency. Chemistry, for example, rests upon law of constancy of the bodies and forces. The law of chemical affinity and law of definite proportions are equivalent. In accordance with the law of constancy of the bodies and forces, all bodies remains essentially the same under all circumstances. Chlorine remains chlorine and hydrogen remains hydrogen always. Only as they are combined according to the laws of chemical affinity and certain definite proportions, they change their state and become hydrochloric acid. The cause of this result lies in the art of chemistry. The conditions lie in the specific affinity of the bodies for each other and for the other bodies. The effect is to change their two states into one in the form of hydrochloric acid. So it's coming to the same conclusion. It's giving different examples. There should be a law of affinity which should present in two ingredients or two elements, then there will be a change, otherwise it will not. If there is a ion of hydrogen, at the same time there is an ion of chloride, and both of them have an affinity to each other, then and then it is possible that hydrochloric acid can form. Without that, it cannot. The same is true when if if there is an ion of sodium, at the same time there is an ion of potassium, there is no affinity between them, and there will be nothing which will happen between them. So it should be there, the native ability should be there, then it can produce the change, otherwise it cannot. So that human should be susceptible, that his constitution should be susceptible, that his miasm should be strong enough, or it is dominating, then there will be reaction. Otherwise, that prima causa morbi cannot do anything. So now he gives the same example. The cause of tuberculosis is tubercular bacillus. This is what modern science says. Then in the next paragraph, what he says, the necessary conditions for secondary causes of the action of bacillus are, just put number over there. Number one, the peculiar bodily constitution. Number two, predisposition. Number three, the susceptibility. And number four, environment of the patient. MCQ, right over there, those who are students, MCQ, which are secondary causes as explained by Stuart Close in his book. Secondary causes, there are four. Number one is the peculiar bodily constitution. Number two is predisposition, means miasms. Number three is susceptibility. And number four is environment of the patient. Without these concomitant conditions or causes or secondary causes, no one would ever have tuberculosis. See, very clear regarding his idea. Even though you have tubercular bacilli in your body, that bacilli cannot do anything or cannot produce the tuberculosis in you unless and until first you should have that typical peculiar bodily constitution, a weak, tall, slender, weak, emaciated, or something poor constitution. Then a miasm dominating psychosyphilitic or sorosyphilitic, then the susceptibility should be very high too, so that it can react. And lastly, the environment of the patient, which also plays a role over there and makes defect in the constitution, responsible to produce tuberculosis. If everything is poor, then that bacteria has the capacity to affect the vital force, disturb the vital force, and produce the disease. Without that, it cannot. So, see, these are very, very essential entities one must know. So, no disease, typhoid never caused because of Salmonella typhi unless and until these four criteria are present. Every prima causa morbi, whatever it may be, Vibrio cholerae for cholera is a half truth. Vibrio cholerae, if all those four conditions are present, can then and then only produce the cholera, otherwise it cannot. So this concept, in order to explain in detail, he tried to explain this, and he keep it in your mind. Unless and until peculiar bodily constitution is there. Number two, that is the predisposition is there. Number three is susceptibility is poor, and number four, the environment of the patient is poor. Then and then there is a development of disease, otherwise no. I think with this line, we'll stop over here and tomorrow we'll continue with it. Today evening, we don't have a session. Not possible to conduct the session, Mater Medica session today. We'll make it tomorrow. Yesterday, there was no recording happened regarding carboanimalist, unfortunately. So I will do that recording just now after this session. Those who want to attend or those who have not attended yesterday's carboanimalist session can join the present session. Immediately within 5 minutes, I'll be live over there with Zoom with the same remedy which yesterday I have discussed. So that there will be a recording available for future. So I'm going to do that immediately. So that's all for today. Thank you and good evening.
Thank you, sir. Have a good evening.